r/AskReddit. What is the craziest/weirdest thing you have done to avoid facing your fear? I'm so terrified of public speaking that in college I would do anything in my power to avoid it. On the first day of every semester, I would read through every syllabus to check if there would be a presentation. If there was, I would spend hours calculating what the highest possible grade would be if I took a 0 for the assignment. Then I would work extra hard on all the other assignments and exams, so I could still pass without giving a presentation. This method worked, and I graduated with honors and never gave one speech. This was not voluntary, however it certainly forced my hand, so I think it still falls in the what have you done to avoid facing your fear category. I, like many others, am terribly afraid of public speaking, especially in school, when I have months to anticipate a presentation. A few months back, last semester, I had a big group presentation to do. It was a mere 10-minute speech in front of a class of no more than 35 indifferent students, but I, of course, was shitting myself thinking about it for weeks leading up to presentation day. Long story made shorter, I woke up that day 5 hours early, 5 in the morning, from nerves. I then showered, ate a microwaved breakfast burrito, and drank a cup of coffee. Then I headed to my class about 2 hours before it started, and ended up pacing back and forth down the foyer outside my classroom door. Class started and I signed up to be the last presenter to speak, and sat down in a cold sweat, while others gave their presentations without a hitch. It was at this time that I felt my stomach beginning to turn. I had felt pretty awful ever since that burrito and coffee, but I just chalked it up to nerves until now. My stomach was really rumbling. It felt like my insides were a bubbling crock pot. Before I knew it, my bowels had pushed out a small squeak of a fart. The silent but deadly variety escaped my sweaty cheeks like a thief in the night. I grasped my desk and prayed no one would notice. I thought the coast was clear when a girl sitting to my right looked over to me in disgust after smelling the putrid stench of my ass gas. As I reluctantly returned her gaze, with the stupidest of expression my face is capable of, an enormous trumpet burst of a fart shot out of my ass like a bat out of hell, followed up with a spittle of but grease that painted my underwear in brown. I was locked in eye contact with this girl for what felt like minutes, but was in retrospect mere seconds. Then the entire class erupted with laughter as I looked onto the astonished/bewildered faces of my colleagues. Needless to say, I then stood up and ran out of the classroom, never to return again. I almost dropped out of school entirely. As a toddler, I would always wake up in the middle of the night and see ghosts in the hallway. I have no idea what these were, but I still remember seeing these short, slender, opaque white figures moving around the hallway. Weird as hell. Anyway, I was freaked out. My solution? Climb out of bed, run past the ghosts down the stairs, through the kitchen, and into the living room, where I would hide under the coffee table and call for my parents for an indiscriminate amount of time. This happened a lot. I set a timer to go off every 30 seconds to make sure a spider wasn't moving closer to me on a wall nearby. After about 20 minutes of that, I decided I needed to get rid of it somehow. I got a shoe, but was too scared to try and hit it because I was convinced I would miss and it would jump on me. I got a cup to catch it, but then convinced myself that it was too small to catch it, even though the spider was very small. I then got a large Tupperware meant to hold a lunch and used that to trap the spider. At this point I realized I had no paper to put under the Tupperware, so I had to do the most terrifying stretch in my life trying to grab a paper off a table nearby. Then I finally got the paper and started carrying the spider to the exit, but because the Tupperware was so big it was hard to keep the paper flat and not create an opening for the spider to escape. When I tried to open my front door with my elbow, I shifted my hand too much, and the spider came skittling up my arm. I screamed so loud my dad thought someone was breaking into the house. I was upstairs in my bed, with all my clothes shed, and lying in the hall, in about 30 seconds. Never moved so fast in my life. Cliff jumping has always been tough on my nerves. It has less to do with height and more with the fact that each of the 3 times I have done it, I had to clear several rocks directly below the cliff. Combining several aerobic exercises in such quick succession can be a bit daunting when you don't have to use those things very often. Anyways, the first time I went cliff jumping was when I was with 3 buddies from high school. We were doing a summer trip up through Oregon and Washington as a last hurrah before we went our separate ways in the fall after graduating. We were on the Oregon/Washington border, parallel to a river. We decided to take a lunch break and pulled off the side of the road. Wandering around, we found a cliff jumping spot. The cliff was covered in stickers from different cliff jumping groups. My friends were quick to strip down and start making their way up the cliff. I was a little hesitant, to say the least. You had to get a running start to clear the rocks below. I too got down to my underwear and got to the top of the cliff. My friends were making their way up right behind me. It was effortless for them as they jumped off the cliff again. They beckoned me to join them. I was a ball of nerves and couldn't. Being an odd group of 18-year-olds, they got an idea. They told me zombies were after me and the only way to live was to jump. They made their way back up and started pretending to be shuffling zombies. This surprisingly helped me ease my tension. They were trying to help as best they could. I pretended to shoot one with an air shotgun and pretended to be out of ammo. Friend fell to the ground, continuing to crawl after me. I took one look behind me and ran for it. I leapt from the cliff and screamed through a yuck. Landed in the water perfectly fine. My friends and I were jumping off that cliff for about an hour. Was a great memory from that trip. Second time I went cliff jumping, I got a concussion. This sounds so stupid, but I'm genuinely horrified of the old school ventriloquist dolls. I blame goosebumps. I started seeing a guy, and when I went to his house the first time he had one in his room, I ran and made him put it upstairs. He didn't realize this was a genuine phobia and thought I just found them creepy. So later on he started chasing me with the doll, and I was crying. His roomie realized that I was in full panic and got in the guy's face while I hyperventilated in the corner. He said he thought I was laughing instead of crying and spent forever apologizing to me while I took shots of whiskey to calm the fuck down. I developed a crush on, i.e., became romantically attracted to, someone I was already in love with, i.e., someone I cared about deeply and unconditionally. I was scared to death that she'd reinterpret everything she knew about our relationship based on this new information and become defensive/closed off until ultimately trust eroded and the friendship ended. She'd done nothing to deserve this distrust on my behalf. She's really the most amazingly kind-hearted person I've ever met. It's just that I have anxiety. I confided in our mutual best friend at the time. She said she could not in good conscience keep that secret. She said she talked to her about it in 2 weeks, and I had until then to get out ahead of it by asking her out myself. She helped me come up with what to say because I hadn't even given a thought to actually asking her out before then. My intended strategy was to ignore it until it went away. When it came down to it, I had the message and all I needed to do was copy, paste, send. I couldn't do it. It felt like putting a gun to my head and pulling the trigger. It didn't make matters much better that I knew she'd say something to the effect of no. She typically turns someone down, whether she actually wants to or not, because she also has anxiety. I couldn't do something that made me feel personally responsible, but I'm a programmer, so I abstracted it. I made a mechanism that I could not stop. The message string was obfuscated so that someone reading my source code would never see it unless they were fluent in hexadecimal encoded ASCII. I had a virtual private server with a script that would send the message at a random time before start of business the following day and deleted my sole SSH key to log into the server. More specifically, it had a small chance of sending every second, so that there was a 99% chance it would have sent by morning. This absolved me of responsibility. The universe could still intervene, and by some miracle of statistics it might have been avoided. The only way to get a new SSH key was to contact a human at the company during business hours to verify my identity. Thus the script was guaranteed to execute before I could regain access. Of course, I cold reset my Facebook password to block the script. So I changed my Facebook password in the reset email's password both to something I didn't know and recorded it in 2 places, the script and a flash drive that I mailed to myself, also containing the SSH key to the VPS. Next, I wrote a script that would parse the response into a boolean yes or no, based on the presence of apologetic words/phrases versus excited words/phrases. I tested the script with an innocuous message to a random friend, then set it up again with the live payload and executed. Then I got in my car and drove until I lost signal and camped there until morning. I hate the dentist. I don't know where this fear, hatred, and loathing came from, but from a young age I hated it. The smell in the place. The instruments. Anyway, so I knew I had a dentist appointment, so 10-year-old me got out of bed at 5 AM, put on all the camo clothes I owned, Fassa paint, camo netting, the works. Went out into the garden and hid in a bush. Appointment was at 10 AM, so I thought if I stayed there till midday I would have missed it and no chance of being squeezed in late. Eventually people start shouting in the garden for me and looking around. My dad was about a foot from my face, but didn't see me. Went in at 12 o'clock crying. Mum asked me why the hell I hid in the garden. I said because we had a dentist at 10 AM. No love, that's tomorrow. FML. Bought a bladder buddy. I was in the army and drove around field officers as a lowly PFC. Had a urinary tract infection from drinking the tap water in Korea, and I guess soju. You used a condom catheter and clipped the bag to your leg. No one ever noticed it, but it felt weird having all that stuff in my uniform. Never once peed in it. Just having it there gave me an option if it ever felt like I was going to piss my pants. Helped calm me down a lot on our weekly drives to Seattle and Incheon Airport. Okay, so I get grossed out by dirty plastic, like old toys or plastic mannequins. Like, looking at them makes me gag and I have to look away. No idea where it came from, but it's visceral. So like 8th grade gym, everyone in my school has to do mandatory CPR training, with the final being verification by performing CPR on a dummy. Makes me sick just to think about. I was mortified, and I just knew that if I put my lips on that thing I would just vomit. The day before the final I pulled my teacher aside and begged her to let me do it with anything else. I brought a stuffed monkey plush and said I would perform CPR on it, and bless her fucking eternal soul, she let me do it. I dodged a huge bullet and instead stayed in a room alone with my teacher while she watched me give CPR to a plush monkey. Can't imagine how bizarre that moment must have been for her, but bless her for respecting my weird phobia. I realize that nobody gives a shit, but I'll post it for the sake of sharing. When I was a kid I watched every single movie with my parents. Whether it was Saw I to Final Destination. Tits out. Yeah, he'll be fine. People being ripped in half. Fuck it. Well, I became a very quiet 5-year-old and consumed all of this information that I learned. I deadbolted that shit into my brain. Well, one night in the old house we used to live in we watched The Grudge. Now being the 5th of may have been part of it, or it may have been the fucking noise that the girl made in the movie, but I wouldn't go near a fucking shadow in broad daylight. The darkness scared the shit out of me. My family thought I was the one with problems. Thanks mom. I loved that movie. Ever wondered why all the ultra bright 1000 watt handled light cannons were missing from Walmart? Yay, that was me. I slept with at least 3 night lights for 6 goddamn years and brought at least 2 flashlights and spare batteries for them everywhere I went. At the 4th of July ceremony near Benjamin Banneker Elementary School, and there's some kid with a fucking spotlight attached to his back. Too bad. Somewhat claustrophobic. I took the train to school every day in London. Rush hour is hell on earth for me. I always got a newspaper and stood next to the door/window when going to school to try and take my mind of the clusterfuck of people around me. After school, most people who went home in same direction as me that I'm friends with went in the middle of the train. I always went to the very end of the train. At about 3:45 it ain't busy and the rear of said train is usually mostly empty. So to avoid the crowd, claustrophobia, I always went to the rear. I must have looked like the most antisocial jit on the planet, but I just can't stand in a crowded train if there are empty options everywhere else. I tried it every now and then to see if I was any better, but nah. I just panicked in my head and got off early and took an alternative route every time, even if it was half an hour longer. One night, one awful night, an enormous fucking spider just ran over my white duvet at the level of my face, my eyes, My laptop screen illuminated this scene in blue, only making it seem infinitely worse. I'm lucky the bed is a double, because I threw my laptop across it, otherwise it would have hit the floor, and then proceeded to literally beat the ever-loving shit out of my own human body, using my own human hands. If the spider was on me, I'd die with it, I figured. The duvet got thrown, the pillows got the same treatment. I then stood paralyzed for a few, really quite grim minutes, before beating the shit out of myself again. Where was the fucking spider? I ran out of my room, also forcing my bitch and fries with me, because she is cute, but dumb, and I legit thought the spider would hurt her. Made barriers of sofa cushions from sofa bed 1, stopped the spider sneaking out, and settled in for the night. In our family living room, which had no heating. In Wales, our TV is deeper than it is wide, if that makes sense, and I turned this colossal TV on and could only find the worst programs ever made. I settled on watching it. This was the best I could find, so this should really be showing how dire straits it was. That night was shit, even more so, because I kept doing spider patrols around the door, with Pippin, the dog, standing by me like some bizarre prison drama. Eventually Pippin left me, running upstairs. I did not return to my room for fully 3 days. I still look for that spider. Shit, never told it to anybody. My uncle, who is now dead, he had this severe epilepsy. He would fall into seizures from time to time, like really bad ones. He got it after the car accident. Since that time he started drinking heavily as well. When I was around 18 years old, I witnessed one of those seizures, and it scared the fuck out of me. I didn't know about his problem before, and didn't even know what epilepsy is at all. So, since that time, for some reason I got the phobia of epilepsy, and it grows on me since that time. I also heard that flashy lights could trigger it in people who has it. Well, for some reason, I think, in my head, that I could have it. Don't ask me why I think so. I know it's stupid. And now, I would be afraid of any flashy light, even things like light shows at the clubs, and stuff like that. I get an anxiety every time I experience anything flashy, in the movies, in real life, etc. This is so ridiculous. Young kid, sleeping over at a friend's house. We went ding dong ditching people in our mutual neighborhood. Rang the bell at my violin teacher's house and hid in the bushes, and giggled like little girls. For a minute. Apparently they were having a family event, and take ding dong ditching very seriously. The entire house emptied of about 5 to 7 people with flashlights, and they started combing their property in the road nearby. My friend and I ran the opposite way of his house, knocked on a pastor's door, and pretended like my friend had sprained his ankle, and asked if he would give us a ride home. He obliged and we drove right past the house. They were still outside searching 30 minutes later. I still feel guilty about lying. Thanks for watching UpGoat Reddit. Try like and subscribe button if it still works.